Hey, it's Zach from What the Pod Was That and the All About Nothing podcast. And America's birthday is coming up faster than we can track. Celebrate Independence Day in style with ZJZ Design's latest t-shirt collection on TeePublic. Introducing 3 brand new 4th of July heart designs that perfectly capture the spirit of America. These shirts feature vibrant, patriotic colors and unique heart-shaped designs that stand out at any celebration. Whether you're heading to a fireworks show, a barbecue, or just enjoying the summer sun, our 4th of July heart collection has something for everyone. Show off your love for the red, white, and blue with ZJZ Design. Visit ZJZ Design's TeePublic shop today and get ready to shine this Independence Day. Links in the show notes or visit ZJZDesigns.com and check out all the great designs. New designs come up often. ZJZDesigns.com.
This episode of the All About Nothing podcast is sponsored by Everplay Sports and Social Summer 2026 Adult Sports Leagues. Registering now through May 20th for kickball, softball, volleyball, pickleball, bowling, and more. Visit everplaysocial.com for details and registration. Do it now because these leagues will sell out. It's a great way to get off the couch and hang out with friends while doing enjoyable, fun activities. Again, visit everplaysocial.com and sign up today.
The All About Nothing podcast may have language and content
that isn't appropriate for some.
Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, Nothingers, to the All About Nothing podcast. This is episode number 306. I am Barrett Gruber. You can follow me across all of social media at Barrett Gruber. Please subscribe and share the show. That's how we get new listeners. Also, please consider supporting the show financially by visiting theallaboutnothing.com and becoming an official member and proudly calling yourself a true Nothinger. We'll have more details on that at the end of the show. If you can't do that, please give us a 5-star review, a like, and follow us across all social media. You can find links on the webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. Real quick, want to thank Matt Villardo for being our guest last week. We wish him well on his journey, he and his family moving to Maryland. So we promise that he will be back again, but it'll be remotely because he won't be here in the state. So again, good luck to Matt with him and his family and everything they have going on. Our guest today is running for the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate in Idaho. He is a business owner, a former iron worker, a father of 6, and the author of a raw, deeply personal memoir titled Blue Collared Blessed, A Humble Life in Idaho. His life story entirely defies the standard political script, spanning from a fractured childhood and surviving profound personal trauma to spending 2 years living in a French monastery to building a multi-million-dollar precast concrete business from the ground up. He is running an America First campaign aimed squarely at challenging the political establishment, pushing for radical corporate accountability in healthcare, and bringing a blue-collar voice to Washington. While we certainly won't agree eye to eye on every policy solution, his perspective on labor, corporate corruption, and mental health challenges the traditional political binary. Joining us today to talk about trauma, the dignity of the working class, and his vision for Idaho, please welcome to the show, Denny LaVé. Welcome, Denny, to the All About Nothing podcast.
Thank you, Barrett. I really appreciate being here.
No, I appreciate you being here as well. I have questions, and we can discuss everything, sure. But just real quick, give our audience an introduction. And before you get started, I will say this. I went and checked all of our statistics in the history of our podcast since 2017. We have only had 10 listeners. So I'm hoping maybe this will boost some of our listenership in Idaho because it's a state that I have not visited. I was in Boy Scouts, and I want to say of the contiguous states, all 48, I think I've only not visited like 2, and Idaho is one of them. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I mean, like you said in the summary, right? Turbulent childhood to living in a French monastery to coming to Idaho and finding a beautiful woman, getting married, having a family, having a company. I don't think I could have made this up. Like when I think of, when I think of all the times that I should be dead, that I should be, in a gutter somewhere, like so many unfortunate Americans that have not made it through to the other side of their trauma yet and their brokenness. I can only thank God, because if it wasn't for him, like that's where I would be.
Yeah.
Right? Like Gabor Mate He says, when you're talking about people in pain, like in addiction and suffering, he's like, don't ask what's the matter with you. Ask what's the pain, right? And a big part of my story is like facing the pain, right? I had a lot of things that I was doing that I wasn't happy about, that I couldn't seem to kick the habit or stop doing. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can get some help. And very quickly it turned to, well, we're going to start looking at your childhood. And I was like, F you. Like, no, I built a wall around that, and I built a wall around it for a reason, and we're not going back.
Yeah.
And it took a long time and a lot of hard work to build up the capacity and the resilience, and the self-love to be able to actually break down the wall and go back. Right. And I think that kind of gets to the heart of really the heart of the Christian message, right? Is that, the first commandment, is love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, body, etc. And then Christians also always get a bad rap because, you don't love your neighbor. You're supposed to love your neighbor. But the commandment actually is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And what I found in my own life was that I didn't love myself. In fact, I really thoroughly hated and despised myself. I was really upset at myself, right? Like, if God's grace is sufficient, if God can do all these wonderful things and I'm still screwing up, I must be the problem.
Yeah.
And again, I grew up in a culture of radical responsibility. Like, if an action happened and you did it, then you're responsible. And to a degree, there's a lot of truth to that. But what we now know is that there's actually a lot of neurobiology going on, and there's a lot of neuroprogramming going on that in some cases actually is largely responsible for the actions. And then all of a sudden you start to go, oh, that's what Paul meant in Romans when he's talking about, I don't always do the thing I want to do, and sometimes I do the thing I don't want to do, and I don't understand why. Right?
Yeah.
Well, that there's a clue there, right? And now science is actually coming behind us and going, oh, yeah, and then you start looking at, well, how is that relevant to everyday Americans?
Yeah.
Well, how many of us as middle-aged Americans come from broken families? A lot.
I was gonna say at least 51% now.
At least 50,
I mean, isn't that the
right?
Yeah.
And I think if you look deeper in the numbers, a lot of it is even more, right? Because you have a lot of broken families that get together and have blended families that then become broken families that then weave back together into blended families. And as much as we tell ourselves kids are resilient, and that's true, like, resiliency doesn't mean unwounded or unscathed.
Right.
Right. And the reality, and this is the lived experience of so many people, right, is that, this is kind of a trope in the, 12-step circles, but it's like hurt people.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're right.
Anything that's not transmuted is transmitted. And so now, we have multiple generations that have been through this cycle of broken family trauma. That leads to a lot of other bad consequences. And a lot of times that's coming from, like, you're getting stuff on the ACEs list that's compounding generationally. And I think it's important to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, we can't work on it. We can't address
No, you're absolutely right.
Right.
I think for most people, if, that do, and I say this, that do life successfully, if there's a book written about their life, if there's some recording of it, the first chapter obviously is probably going to have to deal with some sort of trauma, but the rest of the book, in order to say that you've had a successful life, has to be how you worked through that trauma. What was it you did? How did you interact with your neighbors, your family, and things like that? It's all about how you pick yourself back up. I think, admittedly, I come from a broken family. My parents divorced when I was 12, 13 years old. And then the subsequent relationships with both my mother and my father, and navigating that. My sister had trauma in her life as a result of my mother and my father. And it's, it's it's just one of those things that it's not necessarily about letting go of that pain, but just figuring out what it takes to get through it. It's never going to not hurt, but it might not hurt less, or it might hurt less as time goes by if you figure out how to successfully deal with that.
There's so let's dig into that a little, right? Like one of the things that we now know, right, from studying neurobiology is that when these things happen, whatever way we adapt or cope to these situations, right, that neural pathway gets embedded into the brain. It gets, kind of grooved in at whatever stage of neurological development we're in.
Yeah.
Right? So now imagine, you mentioned you were 13, 14, 12, 13, 14 in that area, right? You're starting to get into that prefrontal cortex area of development, right? Now imagine you go back to where, somebody's in the limbic system, somebody's in the prelimbic system, right? Like those areas, when you get response mechanisms grooved into those, it becomes exponentially harder to reprogram, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, like the kids internalize what's happening,
Yeah.
right? Like it's my fault. It's not their fault, generally speaking. That's my observation.
It's hard to imagine a child being at fault for.
It's very hard to imagine it, right? But that's not how the child's brain
Right.
processes it, And anyways, like I feel like that's it's such we could go on for hours and hours.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? Because that's a critical component of where we're at societally.
Yeah.
Is it's important that we have a lot more grace with each other, right? And it's important that at the same time, like we hold each other accountable and help each other up.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I remember a conversation that I listened to, and credit where credit's due. It was from a priest in Nebraska called Father Sean Kilcawley, and a very wonderful priest. Somehow actually became, in charge for the Diocese of Nebraska of their work in combating pornography in families, right? Because that's become a real scourge in modern America, right? Is that pornography is easily accessible at anybody's fingertips for free and anonymously.
Right.
And some of the stuff that's happened is that, the average age of exposure, I'm not sure how old you are. I'm 49. So
47.
For our generation, the average age of exposure was like 12 to 13, which is still way too early. Okay. That's not it's way too early. We're not emotionally ready for hypersexuality at that age.
Absolutely agree.
But today, the age is down somewhere between 8 and 10 for first exposure. Right. And so this is becoming this real issue. So Father Kilcawley was recounting a story where, he was working with his family whose son had become, kind of hooked on pornography. They caught him, and they were just irate, and they're like, "Father, we got to talk." And so they came in, and you can see the parents are visibly upset, the kids visibly upset, everybody's upset, and Father Kilcawley says to the boy, "Well, how do you think Jesus would react? Like if he walked in the room and saw you looking at this?" And the kid was like, "Oh, he'd be so angry, and he'd be yelling at me, and he'd be throwing stuff, and he'd be just like telling me I was going to hell." And
would he though?
And then that's where Father Kilcawley came in. He's like, what he would really say is, "An enemy has done this to you, and I'm so sorry that this happened to you. And I love you, and I'm going to do everything I can." And he would hold you in his arms, and he would tell you that over and over again until you believed it.
Yeah. When it comes to, I was just gonna say, when it comes to addictions of any sort, whether it's pornography or alcohol or drugs and that sort of thing, I don't believe that anyone does it it becomes addicted to it out of desire. they're addicted to it because of whatever it is that they're missing. There's something that isn't, neuroscience. There's something that's not releasing that dopamine in their brain, and this is a substitution for that.
That's part of it. And again, that's where, Dr. Mate would say, well, where's the pain? Like, usually it's a numbing reaction, right? It's something bad happened and they can't escape the neurological, psychological pain. And so they're trying to blot it out. And
Right.
whether it's from their own actions or actions of others, like, we can cause ourselves tremendous psychological pain, right? By our own bad actions. Like that is a possibility. But, I just look at that and I go, it took a lot of work to get to a place where I, got to that proper self-love of going, wow, that's the love that each of us has to have for ourselves, is that deep unconditional love of understanding that yeah, we're under attack. Yeah, we do bad things, but we're still deeply loved. And then once we get there, that's how you finally can love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And in today's society, it seems sadly missing, right? And it's not. I know it's not new. I know, people have always, like, I'm in a political race at the moment. I see a lot of toxic dialogue online. I see a lot of trolls out there doing the troll thing, and keyboard warriors. And, it's one of those where I know that's not new, but it's definitely not the best we're capable of. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the destigmatizing of trauma. In your memoir, Blue Collar Blessed, you open up about incredibly heavy, deeply personal experiences, severe mental health battles, suicide attempts that served massive turning points in your life. Progressive spaces have spent years pushing to destigmatize these exact struggles, but it remains incredibly rare to hear a conservative male candidly speak so candidly about them on the campaign trail. How has going through that intensive therapy shaped your perspective on the public health crisis? And what do you think the political leaders are missing when it comes to the mental health epidemic we're facing as working class men?
So the real thing is more of a societal miss, right? Like, it's a desire for our actions to not have consequences,
Mm,
right? It goes back to what we were just talking about in that family scenario, right? Like, when you go through a family breakup and you're carrying that baggage, and then you grow up but perhaps you're trying to numb the pain from that event, which creates more baggage. And then you might get into a relationship which is going to have issues because you have these unresolved things that you haven't worked through, which is going to cause more baggage. And that accumulated psychological, spiritual baggage, that gets pretty heavy.
yeah.
And when you don't see a way out, assuming it's more of a conscious process, when you don't see a way out, that's when the suicidal ideation and the suicidal attempts can come in, right? And oftentimes, like, I have a lot more compassion now than I did before for people who go through this, because, for myself, like, it was very much a third person looking on at the event type thing going on, right? Where it didn't feel like it was fully me in my body. It felt like I was almost watching. And so to get to a place where I could, get to a safe spot and let that ride out and pass, was a challenge, but I did. But when I think about the public health concern part of it, right? Like, I think, we have to stop pretending that these societal trends don't have an impact. And unfortunately, they don't all have legal solutions,
Right.
right? Um, when we all want to hit the easy button in our relationships, and when things go sideways and we hit the eject button, and, like, that is going to have consequences for us and for our kids.
Yeah.
And again, I don't ever want to say that somebody should stay in a deeply abusive relationship or an abusive relationship. and at the same time, like the fairy tale version of marriage that we believe in a relationship that we seem to kind of idolize and think that it should be, that's also not real. And we're, we are causing a lot of damage to ourselves and our kids by pursuing this kind of storybook ideal rather
Yeah.
than kind of going, hey, you know what? A big part of success in a relationship is putting up with each other's crap.
Yeah.
You know?
It's,
Because
you
we
have
all
to deal
sin.
with it with everyone around you.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Right. And I mean, I was listening to somebody talk about it yesterday, about how do you have these hard conversations in a relationship. And it's like, well, a big part of it is realizing that like we all have faults. We all make mistakes, and having some grace with the people in your life when they make mistakes, like going, yeah, you had a human moment.
yeah.
Let's get
Yeah.
back with me after
Absolutely.
a few minutes once you've thought about that. And,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, I look back at my time in RCIA when I was becoming a Catholic, and the deacon that led our class. One of the things that he would say he would talk about stories about Jesus and interactions with people, and then how for him when he became Catholic, that the stories that he always heard about Jesus always made it sound so perfect. Then that everything always worked out. And he said, don't ever think that. Don't ever think that Jesus, outside of crucifixion and all of the everything he went through at the end, don't think that he wasn't facing those battles throughout this course. You don't think that there were some disciples where he was like, oh my God, this guy, like he said, he said, he was experiencing everything you experience.
Yeah.
So don't try to put Jesus on a pedestal that's going to that ultimately is going to make you think that you can't attain some level of happiness outside of, he said, that's not what any of this is supposed to do to you. This is all supposed to be designed to say, hey, here is an example of what you should try to attain and be. And, that, and ultimately, even outside of my Catholic faith, I live that life. I live a life where I try to have as little negative impact on anyone as possible. I know it still doesn't work out because I get death threats on this show. So it's not,
so much.
But
That's wild.
they all get turned into SLED or our law enforcement division. So it's not, they look after them. But, I completely understand what it is you're saying. And I agree. You spent nearly 2 years living as a monk in a 1,000-year-old Dominican monastery in France.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was incredible. I'll be honest, coming home was a little bit of a shock for me because I went through the whole novitiate. We got to the end of the novitiate and I was like, I'm ready to take my vows.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and they said, actually, we think you should go home, have a family. I'm like, okay, all right. Like you're in charge. This is, that's the deal, right? You're placing yourself under obedience. And if that's what you're told, then, you don't sit there and duke it out and say, why don't you try to kick me out? Let's see how tough you guys really are, Like if they say go home, you go home. But to spend like the American experience is very, especially one like mine, right, is very turbulent. You're always on the go. It's go, go, go,
Sure.
go, 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 go. Right. There's not a whole lot of room in American life for contemplation, for meditation, for going slow, for appreciating, that's not the typical American life, right? It's, fast cars and rock and roll and, crazy. And then so you go from that and, again, I'm an iron worker by trade. So I'd spent a few years ironworking and being, what's called a connector, right? So I'm climbing around in the iron, I'm walking the steel beams, um, hanging it out there, being pretty, doing some pretty wild things as far as work goes, right? Some pretty risky things. And then you go into this monastery where it's like you have a small cell, you you're getting up at 3:30 in the morning to go pray and read the gospel, and every 2 hours you're meeting back in the church to pray again, practically, and it was very different too from the instance of I didn't speak French when I went over.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so they were like, "Hey, well, you're going to learn French by immersion, and oh, by the way, you don't get to speak unless you speak French." So that made my first few months a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But hey, I picked up French fairly quickly and could hold a decent conversation, in 6 months. So,
Yeah.
uh, but overall, like, what an experience, right? And just to really learn that lesson of submission to God was a great thing. And then to come back under the guidance of, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do next. That's a place of peace. I would wish that on everybody.
That's why I see a future as a hermit living on the side of a fjord in Norway.
Oh,
In my
yeah.
in my future,
Yeah.
complete isolation.
Yeah. That actually, people find this stunning, but that actually was a thing in the Middle Ages for married men to get to a certain point in their life, married couples actually. They would get to a certain point in life where their kids were grown up, their obligations were taken care of, and they would each retire to a monastery. The women
Yeah,
would go to a convent, the men would go to a monastery, and they'd be like, you know what? We love you. You have my permission to go. You have my permission to go. And the women would go pray and do their thing. The men would go pray and do their thing. And there was a lot of people that did that in the
yeah,
course of Christian history, right?
interesting.
It's
Yeah,
it's definitely a change up from the I've got to keep working and keep amassing my fortune until I die because I have to whatever consumerist dream somebody has out there. It's a very different ideal, and
I have to admit that the idea of paying potentially $5 a gallon of for gasoline has me at that point where it's like, well, how long am I going to have to keep working in order to pay for gasoline? Thankfully, I don't drive that much. That it's not a real concern. But I see on
I wish
social
I could
media.
say the same.
Yeah, I was going to say there's, also look into your Senate campaign's website is Denny for Senate or Denny for Senate, right?
DennyForSenate.com. Yep.
Yeah, DennyForSenate.com. You can do donations there at the website. But you should be writing those off on the campaign. Don't pay for that yourself. I know how campaigns work.
The funny thing, fuel is one of those. I don't know. See, so I'm a political outsider, right? I'm not a politician.
Sure.
And so when I looked into the fuel thing, it was like, well, if you can't 100%, track it and log it and,
Sure.
demonstrate that 100% of that fuel bill went to the campaign and usage for the campaign, then, you can't write off any of it. I'm like,
I'll just pay for it.
I'm just going to pay for it. Like,
Yeah.
it's coming out of my pocket either way for the most part. So,
Yeah.
whether it's directly out of my pocket or whether I donate the money or loan the money to the campaign, and then either way, it's predominantly coming out of my pocket. So I'd rather just have it come out of my pocket and not have to fight with the Senate Ethics Committee down the road over my mileage log.
Agreed. I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
It's
Before we talk about some of the campaign and policies, a core message in your book is that character and life experience matter significantly more than elite credentials. If elected, you'll be walking into a U.S. Senate surrounded by career politicians, corporate lobbyists, Ivy League lawyers. How do you protect your identity as a builder and stay grounded so that Washington doesn't swallow you up?
I'm not sure which funny fork to take here. Okay. There's this thing when iron workers go around job sites that their tool belt, because of the tools we carry, makes a certain sound, a certain click-clang as we go everywhere.
Okay.
And it's amazing to see people clear out of the way when they hear the click-clang coming, right?
That's fair.
The other part of it, the other funny fork is I've been talking to my priest at church, and I said, Father, if I win the election, I'm probably going to need a priest as an escort in D.C., somebody to be my, what's the word they call it in the monastery? Now I'm drawing a blank, but it's like the monks always travel 2 by 2, right? They never.
Okay. Yeah.
And so like, Father, I'm going to need probably a priest. And in fact, I'm probably going to need an exorcist.
There aren't surprising. There aren't a whole lot of exorcists still in the. There's not a whole lot in that order of the Catholic priests anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I say that half jokingly, but
yeah, I know.
Just recently, listening to Father Ripperger and Tucker Carlson talking about it, going, yeah, that actually, I know I say that tongue in cheek, but that actually could be legitimate, right? Of the battle there is definitely one that has attracted some spiritual warfare, right? That there is
low lives,
some demonic activity on the hill, and it attracts
both sides of the aisle.
and the reality is, I mean, it makes sense, right? Power, when you have human power, it attracts that demonic energy, that demonic forces, because they would like nothing more than to see people go to hell.
Yeah.
And the more that our laws steer away from right reason and natural law and from, doing good things, case in point, right? You have all these well-meaning people that are perfectly okay with, illegal immigration because we need more people. And on the other hand, like, we've killed over 70 million babies since Roe v. Wade. Like, if we have a population issue here in our country, it's a self-inflicted one.
Well, so you mentioned Roe v. Wade and obviously abortion. Well, let me ask you, as a Catholic, obviously I have a profound objection to abortion. But as a progressive, I also recognize that there are, like, I don't ever want to see abortion used as a birth control. This isn't a way of preventing pregnancies. This isn't a way of preventing life, but there are obviously, even in the Catholic faith, there's recognition that there are necessary periods of time where a woman's who is pregnant may be if the child is facing profound illness that is going to affect the mother, that even in those situations, that medically speaking, that there is a necessity for it. But the number of
on that, because the
Sure.
church's teaching is actually very much, it's permissible to carry out a medical procedure with the intention of saving the mother.
Yeah.
It is never permissible to carry out an abortion to save the mother. With a direct, like, if you're doing a procedure that might end up in the baby dying to save the mother, fine. But the intention of killing the child can never be the first intention or even a direct intention of the procedure.
Yeah.
And history is replete with very heroic women who have sacrificed themselves to bring that child into the world.
Sure.
Right. And so I think, if a person, especially, again, we're both Catholic here. So, like, the Catholic Church's teaching is very internally consistent, but there's been a lot of dilution and a lot of twisting of it in the last 40, 50 years to try to come to a place where we can accommodate accepting abortion, accepting the intention of killing a baby, of killing this unborn baby, right? And that's not, that really is not the teaching of the church.
No, you're absolutely right. In the scenario that I'm speaking of is when the child, I say when the baby is stillborn, or the baby passes during the pregnancy, those sort of situations. Here in South Carolina, they are criminalizing they are attempting to criminalize a miscarriage. Like, they want to launch investigations into what caused the miscarriage, with up to potentially imprisoning a woman for a miscarriage, and then potentially putting her to death because she had a miscarriage that then resulted in an abortion, because obviously, a fetus inside of a woman's body becomes, potentially of sepsis and things like that. Like, just illnesses will occur. But the state of South Carolina, we have leaders that are looking to try and criminalize even a non-action in order to prevent abortions.
Yeah, that's a very interesting case, because clearly a miscarriage is not an abortion. Clearly a stillbirth is not an abortion, right? So again, I don't know the specifics of the South Carolina
Sure.
situation, but it's very funny. Like a lot of people will talk about the rape exception, for example, right?
And incest and things like that.
But yeah, rape and incest, and it's very interesting because like the church's teaching is actually that, like, so for example, this is sorry listeners, we're gonna get a little graphic here. Okay,
It's okay.
but we can be adult about it. If a couple has intercourse, a married couple has intercourse, right? So we're going to assume that it's a illicit marriage.
Consent. Yeah.
It's consensual. They're perfectly allowed to have sex, and to conceive, right, and have a baby. That's perfectly legitimate. The church's teaching is that when this couple comes together and has sex, neither party is allowed to do anything that would frustrate conception.
Mm-hmm.
So, the husband can't attempt to pull out and ejaculate outside. The wife can't, try to flush out the semen of the sperm to prevent conception. Like, it has to be allowed to take its natural course. Right? Because that's part of the fruit and the intention of marriage and of the act itself. Right? It's essentially the principle of it. It's not okay to divorce the consequence of an action from the action.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? But the church is also very consistent in saying, look, if a woman is raped, she has every right to attempt to prevent conception from happening.
She was not a consensual part of that act.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's allowed to take whatever measures to prevent conception from happening. Right. And again, I think there's I got to be careful with what I say there, because I don't know all of the actions that she could take. Right.
Sure.
But the dividing line would be, once conception happens, despite the circumstances of that life's conception, that life is still sacred.
Sure. Yeah.
And so again, it's one of those where it's like, we're saying, okay, in this consensual, legal, illicit relationship, blessed relationship, these actions aren't allowed. But outside of that, when something illicit has happened, right, then those actions could potentially be allowed up to a point.
Yeah.
Right. But after that, like, life is sacred. Right. And we can tell a lot about a society. You look, and anthropologists look and study. We can tell a lot about societies on how they treat their children, their infants, how they treat their elderly.
That is something in this country that we seem to have not figured out yet. After a child is born, in many states across this country, we see continuous degradation of what potential childcare should look like, and just in some cases, just the absolute disrespect of what our elderly go through as they wrap up their lives. And as a progressive and as a conservative, I feel like those are conversations that are not taking place enough in the political sphere as to how we get through, how we claim that every life is every conception is sacred, and then when the child is born. But even here in South Carolina, as soon as they're born, that's when the state just goes, all right, it's your problem now. And then with how the elderly are treated, it seems like more and more that there's a constant desire from conservatives, at least in Washington, to look at Medicare and say, we're not going to bother trying to figure out how to embolden this system. We're not going to bother to try and figure out how. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to make cuts so we can send more money to the military. That doesn't even ask for it. That continues to.
I think that's fair. I think, there's an interesting part that goes, again, from a conceptual standpoint, we go, well, what's the norm, right? Because generally we rule make around a norm. Like,
yeah.
What's the typical sphere that we find of experience, right? Of lived experience and things that we encounter. And then we have these fringe cases, these things are out on the extreme edges that we sometimes have to make exceptions for, right?
Sure. Yep.
And I think where a lot of the conundrum comes from, right, is that from a conservative point of view, we would say, look, each family is responsible for taking care of their children, and families are responsible for taking care of their elderly, right? Like, I do have a sense that someday I'm probably going to have to help take care of my dad and my mom, right? And if their wealth gets used up in the process of that taking care of, and there's nothing to pass down to us, well, that's part of the process, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there is a contingent of folks that go, well, we want somebody to take care of us, but we don't want it to use up all of our wealth, you know? And there's also like, we've spent a lot of time in our family. Like when I grew up, my grandmother lived with us for about 10 years. Right? I remember the trip where my dad, my stepmom, and we drove up to Montana to go pick up my grandmother, who had been living in some sort of subsidized housing or something, and she's living on this little tiny pension, this little tiny Social Security check, and
Yeah.
she's living off of cat food, right? Because she wanted her cats, and so in order to afford to have cats, like she's sharing cat food with cats, right? So
Breaks my heart.
we took her in, right?
Yeah.
And like, I know that it wasn't easy for my stepmom. I know it was challenging for the kids and for other folks, right? But there wasn't ever a thought of like, what government resources are out there and how do we get the government to pay for this and how do we get the government to give us a subsidy so we can take care of grandma at home. It was this is my mom.
Yeah.
And I'll be damned if I'm letting my mom eat cat food in a ratty apartment. I'll find a way to help her live with us.
Yeah.
Right? I got a lot of respect for my dad for doing that. You know, and then there came a point where it was like, okay, we got a lot of kids. She had reconciled with some of her other children. She went and stayed with them. When they passed away, she was in an assisted living home and then a nursing home, and she was experiencing dementia. We went and got her again and brought her close to family again. And granted, she needed a higher level of care, but like we took the steps as a family to take care of that.
Yeah.
And really, I think the dichotomy or the kind of the viewpoint comes down to is that whose responsibility is it first and foremost to take care of each other, right? Like, is it your responsibility to take care of my mom?
If the question is being directed to me, it isn't a responsibility that I would be aware of, but I can say that if you and I as friends, if there was a need for me to help, then I would feel responsible in some way.
But that's the difference between a charitable feeling, right?
Right.
A sense of or even altruism versus saying the government needs to take these resources and goods from other people to take care of my mom.
Sure.
Right? And I think a big part of the conceptual difference is like, yeah, we all want our moms taken care of. The question is, who's responsible for taking care of our moms?
Yeah. I think the argument on the other side that would be made would be that the federal government has set up a grant system, a federal program in order to subsidize that potential health care. And what we continue to see is, and you know, my mother's on Medicare and she has Social Security benefits, but she worked for 67 years of her life, 60 years of her life in order to have that as part of what would support her for the rest of her life. And while we never see an actual decrease in Medicare benefits, we don't ever actually see Social Security benefits being cut. Like it always just becomes that threat. It always becomes that it's always just that lingering idea that's constantly being pushed on us as voters that this is going to happen if you don't vote for this party, or you're going to everyone's going to take advantage of it.
Fear mongering out there for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the Social Security one, that one to me is a little more cut and dried, right? Because we're all paying into that as employees. I mean, even me as a business owner, I pay into it. I get to pay both halves. right?
Yeah, you do.
Only half and the other half.
Yeah.
Because I'm a winner, baby. But
Do you feel? Hold on. Do you feel like a winner all the time? Is
not
it,
all,
or
not
does
all the
it just
time.
comes?
Not
Does it
all the
comes in
time.
waves?
But sometimes I got to remind myself that I'm a winner. The Medicare one I find very interesting because when a lot of these programs were developed, a lot of the medical technology and medical life extending treatments that we have today didn't exist.
Right.
Right. And nobody wants to be the guy who says, sorry, we're not providing that life extending treatment to you because
Right.
it's not in the budget. Like nobody wants to be that guy. Right. Um, but the reality is that like a lot of the, what is it? I think 80% of healthcare spending happens in the last 5 years of life, something like that.
Yeah.
It's fairly close to that. And when we layer in, some of the stuff that's going on, like one of the talking points on my campaign has been, Wall Street Journal reported a month ago that in peer countries to ours, first world type nations, 75 cents of every healthcare dollar goes to frontline workers and 25 cents goes up to administration and overhead, et cetera. In America, it's 9 cents on the dollar goes to frontline workers.
Yeah.
Right. So when we collectively are spending $5 trillion a year between government and private healthcare in that industry, and I'm going, maybe it's not 91% bloat in the middle, right? Maybe it's 50% bloat. But
Sure.
when we're talking $2.5 trillion, we are not talking chump change. We're talking some pretty nice homes in the Hamptons and $300 or $300 million mega yachts, right? Like that.
Yeah, yachts, jets, helicopters. Yeah.
And so
Tickets to the Met Gala.
Mm-hmm. And the reality is that I don't care what party you are, profiteering on people's sicknesses is wrong.
Yeah.
And the bigger problem is that we have created a legislative body around healthcare that's allowed that to happen. And in fact, that's incentivized that to happen. Now, I don't know that we necessarily intended it. I don't want to assume bad motive.
Sure. Agreed.
Right. Because I definitely believe in the principle of like never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence and stupidity.
I'm going to write that down. Words to live by. It's not their fault. They were dumb.
But we've created these perverse incentives that have made it so that we have this healthcare system that's 91% overhead.
Yeah.
Like that's nuts. Like
yeah.
That's crazy time. Right? Like I'm in the construction world, and the subcontractors have high overhead for the construction world, and for construction contractors, it's somewhere between 15 and 20% for subcontractors for overhead.
Yeah,
and
that's incredible.
Like, it's pain's real.
Yeah,
right. And the larger you get, the smaller your proportion is from overhead. Right, like there's economies of scale, but if that's the case, and we have $5 trillion of spending, like how come ours isn't 80 cents on the dollar?
Right.
Oh, because we created an incentive where the only way the guys at the top make more money is if they can bloat the middle. And they've done a really good job of that. I've dealt with some stuff where it was, I've seen them try to charge me 7 times more than what they charged my insurance company. Dealt with that.
Oh yeah.
I recently fought a private equity healthcare firm last year. I went in for a 30-minute visit because I thought I was coming down with pneumonia, which I was. Thought I was going to an urgent care. They treated it as an ER.
Wow.
And when I got the bill, I was in there 30 minutes. I got an X-ray and an antibiotic tablet, and they charged $125,000. And I'm going, whoa, okay, my insurance company will definitely see the problem here, and they will definitely fight this, and we're good. No,
did they?
No,
no.
The private equity firm, reduced the bill graciously by $115,000, and my insurance company just paid their part, and they said, "Hey, Mr. LaVé, here we'd like you to pay your $2,100 bill." I'm going, what are you people talking about? Like I was in your room for 30 minutes. We didn't use anything in the room. You took my vitals. We did an X-ray. Like
they gave me a pill.
I could see $2,000 for the whole thing, maybe, because I know it's exorbitant, but $125,000. So then, the whole process, most people don't know this, but you can request an itemized bill from your healthcare provider.
Yep.
The itemized bill that I got was not really that itemized. It was pretty, and I get it. As a business person, you don't like to itemize your fixed price billing because people pick it apart. I get it. But what had happened was this tablet they gave me was a basic antibiotic tablet. And they were charging $244 for the tablet. But the reason why the bill was so high was it was a 500 milligram tablet, and they were charging for 500 tablets. And so when I called them back and said, "Look, here's the error," they said, "We're sorry, sir, we can't help you. Would you like to pay your bill?"
No.
Like, no. So I wrote to them and I said, "Here's the error." They ignored it. I wrote to them again. I said, "Look, if you don't address this concern that I've raised to you over the phone, I've raised to you in writing, I'm turning you into the state health insurance board."
Yeah.
I immediately got a phone call back. Like, immediately got a phone call back.
Yeah.
Saying, "Oh, we're really sorry, sir. We'll look at your bill." They did. It went from $125,000 to the $2,000 that, I expected it to be. My insurance company paid their part. My out of pocket turned out to be like $35. But how many Americans have A, how many know that they can get an itemized bill? B, how many of them know how to fight the fight? And C, how many of them have the time in their everyday life to do that?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
No. I've had situations where my daughters, we go to the pediatrician. They just happen to bill the wrong code, the wrong procedure code matched with the wrong diagnosis code. My insurance company takes a look at that and they say, "Okay, so this is what we allow for that procedure code with that diagnosis. And we don't cover but a portion of that. So you're now responsible for that from the doctor's office." And it was to the tune of, I think, between the two I have twins that are 11, between the two of them, it was like $900 that I was being charged for what was basically a wellness visit, which under my insurance is 100% covered every single year. You get one of them a year and it's covered. Well, they didn't bill it as a wellness visit. They billed it as an office visit with some other things attached to it because the person that was in the billing office hadn't been trained on the necessary billing. Fought that thing for 4 years. Finally gave up and just paid it because I was to the point now where, when they start threatening collections, which by the way is such a ridiculous thing. Like, people should not be afraid of this idea of collections that I mean, pay your bills, pay what you owe. But when they start threatening collections, you know what? Sometimes the collections office might be better than dealing with the billing office at the doctor's office. I mean, that's a fact. But
yeah, it's the system. The system is again, it's broken at a legislative level, which smart, but I would argue unethical people are exploiting in order to profiteer off the sickness of Americans. And I'm not okay with that. And I don't think any right-minded person should be either. Right?
Yeah.
I very much want companies to make a profit.
Sure.
But like that tablet I was telling you about, it cost them 10 cents to make that tablet.
And that's and I will say, I do agree that when pharmaceutical companies come out with new medications, like we've got these GLP-1s out right now, and for the most part, there isn't a generic version because those patents are still owned and controlled by the pharmaceutical companies that make them. So the pharmaceutical companies get to make the price. I recognize that those pharmaceutical companies use that exploded pricing in order to throw it back into their research and development, because we want pharmaceutical companies to continue to do research and development so that they can come up with the potential cure for cancer or Parkinson's, things like that. We want that to happen. But I also recognize that when that patent is released to the public and we have pharmaceutical companies that can create generic versions, I want to see those prices come down. I want to see, the generic version of that pricing. But right now, for some of the GLP-1s, they're stuck in the FDA because of some of the things that are happening behind doors with our legislators and things like that are keeping the FDA from giving an approval to the generic drugs so that those generic drugs can't make it to market.
Yeah, and I think there is some of that. I think the flip side is this, is that a lot of my understanding is that a lot of the drugs that are coming out, the the patents are actually about delivery mechanisms.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Not so much about the actual
product. Yeah.
Right. The other thing about it is I have been told, and again, shoot me if I'm wrong, I guess, but I've been told that a lot of our highest and best innovations in the medical sphere, as far as pharmaceuticals, are actually being taken about 90% of the way by NIH and NIH funded grants at research institutes. And then the rights to that are then sold once they have essentially a viable product that just needs its final market testing. Right.
Yeah.
And then, but the drug companies are taking that product that they've gotten from the NIH research institutes, and they're touting it as we've dumped all these billions of dollars into research into this product, and therefore we need a patent and we need to charge this exorbitant amount of money to recover all of our R&D. When the lion's share of the R&D was actually already funded
by the NIH,
by the American taxpayer.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're not wrong about that.
And that's where like there's so much lack of transparency in the medical field and in the medical industry that even the people who are responsible and have a fiduciary responsibility to the patients can't do their job because there's so much money in stake at making the waters murky.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
well, let me ask you this. Do you know any doctors that are living lives of luxury that have giant boats or giant houses in the hills and drive really expensive vehicles?
No, I know. I've talked to my doctor at length about this, and that's where I look at it and I go, I don't see it as frontline healthcare workers getting rich.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't see nurses getting rich. I mean, they make a good living. Let's give them that. Right. I think that's fair. Most nurses make a good living. Most of the doctors I know, they do okay, but they're not crushing it. Right. I mean, we got to recognize most of these doctors come out of medical school with 8 years of debt.
Yeah.
And medical school is not cheap. Right. They could be coming out of school with $400,000 or $500,000 of debt. Like that's a lot of debt. And the insurance companies, they're not just squeezing patients and squeezing the people who pay the premiums.
No.
They're squeezing the doctors too. Like they don't where they get their money from. They just want to make sure they maximize what they get, for their stakeholders, right? And this is a whole nother topic of stakeholder question.
I was just going to say, I know I have several friends that are doctors that work specifically in geriatrics that pay more in insurance for malpractice insurance and things like that to protect them so that they can continue to practice than they pay in home ownership property tax or insurance on their home, like in a year, like tenfold what they pay.
Yeah.
And it's an industry that, absolutely frontline workers, whether they're doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, whoever, like this is an industry that I think has sort of a misrepresentation when it comes to like TV and movies and things like that, because it makes it look as though that this is a lifestyle, that being a doctor provides some sort of glamour, and it isn't. It just based purely on the people that I know that are doctors and nurses and things like that. When
I see my doctor, I'm like, doctor, you get enough sleep? You're looking tired.
Yeah. Do you have anything you need to talk about? I'm here for you.
I do ask him that.
No, I have had to change general practitioners 3 times in the last 3 years because the one GP that I had that I adored and I loved having her as my doctor left to practice in order to take care of her elderly mother, was able to come back when her mother reached a point that she could be okay to be on her own, and then just recently had to leave again to take care of her elderly mother, which means I'm having to change general practitioners again just to continue to receive the care that my insurance affords me,
right,
and my employer affords me. So obviously, I hate the idea of making abrupt cuts in the middle of an episode, but I'm going to have to do that here because this conversation with Denny LaVé was Extremely interesting, and I had a really good time speaking with him. So we went a lot longer, which means I can't really fit everything from the 2.5 hours that we recorded into one episode. So this is where I'm going to split it into a second episode. So stay tuned next week for what will be part 2 of this episode with Denny LaVé. I hope that you'll make sure to stick around and listen to it, because really enjoyed speaking with Denny. I know we come from opposite ends of the political spectrum, but I think that for the most part, we do seem to find that despite the fact that we're both attached to potentially different parties, that there is middle ground in a lot of the things that we talk about. And it was a really great conversation. I hope you'll stick around for the second part, and please do make sure that you do. So that's going to do it for this half of the episode with Denny LaVé. Please make sure you go out and check all the links on our webpage for past episodes, podcast platforms, merchandise, and social media. They're all available on our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. And if you think our financial model of giving away free content and entertainment is silly and you're in the giving mood, why not become an official Nothinger and support the show? Members get early access to this episode as well as exclusive content. You can visit members.theallaboutnothing.com, or you can find a link on our webpage. You can also give a one-time donation through the same link. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can. You can call, leave us a message, 803-672-0533, or you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com, or you can find a link on our webpage for our Discord server. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll finish this episode up next week. You all stay safe, be kind, and keep your hands to yourself.
The All About Nothing podcast is a product of Big Media and produced and engineered by me, Barrett Gruber. Thanks to Cake for our intro music, Sick of You. You can follow everything Cake the band at cakemusic.com. Thanks to Muff the producer for our outro music. You can follow Muff on Instagram at Muff the producer. You can follow me across social media by visiting Linktree/Barrett Gruber. And you can follow Zach King on Linktree/AAN Zach. Want to support the show? Visit our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and become a member. There are several tiers available that give you early access to episodes as well as exclusive content. To find links to our social media, podcast platforms, and merchandise to support the show, as well as past episodes, visit theallaboutnothing.com. If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email the show at theallaboutnothing.com, or you can call our number and leave a message. Dial 803-672-0533. If the time between these episodes is more than you can handle, check out our sister shows. What the Pod Was That with Carrie, Zach, and myself. Welcome to Wonderland with me. Politically Speaking with Erica, Kirsten, and Emily, and Black, White, and Blue in the South with Dr. Jameel Brooks and Bill Kimmler. Please subscribe and share this show. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe and punch that notification bell. Thank you for listening, and hear us next week. The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media, LLC. Copyright 2026.